Hey everyone, welcome to Build on Chain. I'm your host Slava. Build on Chain is a video series featuring technical Web3 leaders who provide hands-on tutorials for their protocols, tools, and frameworks. That breaks down practical implementation strategies and equips developers with the knowledge to start building on-chain immediately. This is the 13th episode featuring Openfort, and we'll demonstrate how to get started and leveraging their protocol. So welcome, Joan, who is the CEO and founder of Openfort.
Hey, Slava, how are you doing?
About yourself?
Thanks, man. All good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great.
Nice.
So let's get started with your background and how did you get started at Openfort?
Sure. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joan, one of the co-founders here at Openfort. We started a little bit, later than 2 years ago, with the whole 4337 kind of abstraction implementation on Ethereum. So it's been like 2 years of wild rides with the improvements on the whole Ethereum UX, as well as further abstractions that we did at Openfort that we can jump on later on as well.
Awesome. So I guess let's get started with the demo. So what are we going to be doing today?
Cool. So I want to showcase very briefly how you can actually use the CLI to create a very simple React web app with Openfort that already implements the onboarding, the creation of non-custodial wallets, and the sending of a transaction via Gasless sponsorship.
Awesome. Let's dive into it.
Let's do it. So here are the Openfort docs. The first thing that we want to do, obviously, like if you want to read more about it, etc., feel free to navigate. But for this demo, the first thing that we want to do is to go to the embedded wallet and then head into React. And on React, we have the option to do it with the CLI, which is the one that we will be creating here, or you can also do like manual steps through the process. Okay, so let's run through the CLI. I already have my terminal here. So what I want to do is npm create Openfort. Okay, that's great. So here, the first thing that the CLI asks us is to put a name. So I'm going to say echo demo. All right. So at Openfort, you basically can build authentication with either using the UI that we already have by default or being completely headless, which means that you can customize the entire UI elements, etc. For this demo, I'm going to use the Openfort UI that also builds in using the Openfort authentication system. Second step, we want to create wallets, right? And so these wallets, we want them to be non-custodial. At Openfort, we have 3 methods to recover these private keys. The first method is the automatic recovery, which is the one that we use with a bunch of cool encryption methods that we can walk through later on and requires you to have a backend. The second one, it's a user password, and the third one is passkeys. So for this example, we won't be creating a backend, so it's like more straightforward. So I said no. We don't have an existing API account recovery. Now, because we've selected Openfort UI, we can select the different themes that we have built in. So in this case, I'm just going to do the auto. And now they're asking us for the private key, the publishable key of the API. So for this, I'm going to go to my dashboard. So in this case, I already have a dashboard called testing. So I go to the API keys. And then I have my publishable key, my project key that I put here. Then I'll add my shield key. So shield I already created. This is a very important part of the non-custodial process of creating a wallet. You'll be basically prompted to save this encryption share that you can only create once, and you'll be able to download it, etc., to store in a safe place. And this basically, it's the encryption share that allows you to encrypt the automatic recovery. In this case, we don't need to have an encryption share because I'm not using a backend, and therefore this process is less redundant. So now I'm just going to publish. I'm just going to post the shield publishable key here too. let's say no for the stages. And so now the process is over, right? So we just need to run through the commands that they're asking us here, echo demo, npm install. So now installing all the dependencies and packages. Let's give it a second. So it is just like making sure that we're downloading all the packages necessary and like setting up all the infrastructure that we need to run this. The cool thing that we would do right after this, it's basically log in, then send a transaction, like a Gasless transaction, and then we'll be able to plug in through the dashboard and see how everything plugs in together, which is pretty cool. All right. Almost there. Now let's do npm run dev. Sweet. So now we have it running on our local host. Okay. Pretty sweet. Let's run this through. Okay, so this is the demo, right? And so in here, the first thing that we'll see is that because I've decided to use the Openfort UI, we are, like the zoom, it's a bit off. Let me put it here better. So because I'm using the wallet, I'm using the wallet widget from Openfort, we already see like the predefined methods of authentication, right? Like you have the guest or like the anonymous login, the email, as well as the wallet login. And so for this example, I can just simply do the guest login. And in this case, we have the manual password recovery. So I'm just gonna input the password recovery here. And it's already connected, right? And so what it just happened here is that if we go on our project and we go to the user section in the dashboard, we can see that we've just created a user. This is the user. This we can see that is the method that they used to authenticate, the guest user. And we can also see that we've created two wallets, right? The first is an EOA that was configured with a recovery method password, which is the password that I inputted. And then because of the default configuration that we have, we also have created a smart contract wallet for this EOA. In this case, this is like the implementation type that it's using, and then the chain where it's deployed. Okay, so this is the first step here, which is pretty cool. What can we do, right, with this wallet? Well, we can sign messages, right? Pretty straightforward. Hello, etc., which is pretty cool. We can do on-chain actions like minting, for instance, and I'm going to go through this in a second. And we can also create other wallets, right? So under one user, we could create other wallets because, as I mentioned, there's like 3 methods of recovery, right? Because we have not set up backend, this method won't work, right? But what will work is the password that we already have or the passkey, right? So I could create another wallet and use the passkey as a method, as a recovery method, right? So this is what it's actually doing, is creating a new wallet, and we can see here I've just created a new wallet. And so if I go here and I just reload, we'll see that now I have 2 more wallets, right? Which is like the EOA that is creating and the smart account related to the EOA. This will sound like a very confusing. Why do I have like 2 new wallets or 2 new addresses here? The reason being is because the default of this implementation creates an EOA, and then it also creates a smart account whose owner is the EOA that we just created, right? And so we can see in here that this one was a recovery method using the passkey, which is pretty cool. Nice. Okay, so this is the first step that I wanted to show you. Now, the cool thing that you can do with Openfort, following up on this, is that you can actually send transactions, right? So you can do wallet actions that we set in here, in which the only thing that you would actually care to make a transaction completely gasless is to add a gas policy, right? So the cool thing that we need to do here in our code, let's go through the code for a sec. So let me open up my IDE. No. Okay, this is my IDE. This is basically the boiler code that we just created, right? So we have the main page where we can see the provider that we're creating, and then we have the different implementations of the wallet, right? And so we can see here that we have the UIs, etc. And the important part here, or like the cool part here, is that we can see the different methods that this wallet is using to configure. So if we go to UI config, on the UI config theme, we will see that this actually has all the different environments necessary to actually make gas sponsorship, to actually make creation of like wallets without requiring passkeys or a password, but making them automatically, etc., which is pretty cool. Nice. So back to the policy part, right? The thing that we need to do here, we have now 3 environments, right? So one is the publishable key of Shield, one is the publishable key of Openfort. What we're missing here is the policy ID that we need to define to sponsor the transaction. So what we need to do is to go to our dashboard, go to sponsor policies, and then we're just going to create a policy. And we're going to create here, we're going to say sponsor policy. Whoops. Sponsor policy. And because this is on Beam, I'm just going to say that it's Beam. And then here I'm going to add the rule that I just want to sponsor all the contract functions. So it's a catch-all. And then we're good to go. So now I've just created the policy, right? So the thing that we need to do is to add the policy to sponsor gas. So we need to add the policy. And if I recall correctly, it's something like bit rush openfort / policy ID. And then in the policy ID, we just add the policy that we just created, which is this API ID here. Where is it? Copy it here, and we add it here. And so with this simple addition of the API ID, we are just able to sponsor transactions, for free. So I could say, okay, I sponsor 2 tokens. That's probably because I need to activate the wallet. 1 second. I'm just putting password back. Okay, errors. Nice. Let me try again. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, this is because my extension of the environment is not correct. It was that part. Okay. Now I just minted the 2 tokens. Yeah. All right. So what actually happened here, I didn't have like the correct environment variable there. But yeah, literally, if I go now to transactions, you would see that I have the transaction that I just minted, like the tokens that I just minted. And you can see here the errors that I was getting before. with this error saying A21 didn't pay refund because I didn't actually put the gas policy correctly, right? So if I actually go to the details on the transaction, I can actually see a timeline of, okay, when the transaction was created, who made it, what gas policy was used, et cetera, which is pretty cool. And so under the specific user, you would actually see that the smart contract should have here, if I reload, the details of like the transaction that just happened, right, which is here. And then therefore, the smart account that we use to make this transaction, it's now activated, right? So that's it. That's the full extent of the demo. You can do cooler things then by adding webhooks to make it faster for chains that have longer times to settle. You can add other contract libraries, et cetera. In this case, we just had already like a sample contract for the beam that we use, this ERC20, but you can have multiples as well. Cool. Yeah, that's the full extent of the demo.
Yeah, I do love the DX of this. I love the dashboard.
Nice.
Like easy to follow, and you guys point like everything out, and everything is within that dashboard.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, man. I think it's like one of the best feedback loops that we managed to get here. I feel like in crypto, usually you are blind sometimes with like these different users, analytics, like how do you monitor transactions and stuff. So we really wanted to double down on the dashboard aspect.
Nice. I do have a few questions though on Openfort specifically, and then I'm gonna throw in a spicy question in the end.
Okay.
So the first one is like you did like 5 launches in 5 days event.
Oh yeah.
You rolled out some features. So can you like throw a little bit of like a deep dive into those and to the users?
So we actually published those on the website as well. We have like a small section on the launch week thing. Like the whole idea here is that every day for 5 days, we launch something cool that kind of like improves the developer experience and the features that we wanted to launch. The first cool thing that we did was basically improving a lot the wallet widget. So before that, we have a wallet widget that wasn't able to actually, let's say in a smooth way for anyone that wanted to be able to receive tokens with the UI itself, to send tokens with the UI, to on-ramp with the UI and this type of stuff. And so we made that extremely easy by implementing like the send get buttons to see the inventory and stuff like that. And then like the 2 subsequent launches that we did on that were an easier way to actually read the inventory of the wallet. This is thanks to a new ERC that is been pushing from the Ethereum ecosystem called the 7811, which allows you to get assets from the RPC directly, which is pretty cool. Then we also added like a couple of like speed improvements for RPCs that also support another one called 7966, which is basically an ERPC method that allows you to like it saves you the burden of like doing 2 or 3 other calls to get the same result, the same hash. Then one of the things that I feel it's underappreciated on the dashboard that we've just seen is that you can actually bring different signers. So you can bring like the previous, the dynamics, the different embedded wallets that you want to use, and you can use any smart contract implementations that you want, right? So imagine that you want to use privy authentication with an implementation from Rhinestone on the smart account section, right? You could do this both with Openfort, and you would still be able to see the dashboard with like the whole orchestration of like the different users coming from privy to the accounts being created for these users to the transactions being sent by those accounts, right? And so that's what
you guys call an OpenSigner, right?
Yeah, no, that's basically just like the platform orchestration part. The OpenSigner thing that we launched is basically a self-host, an open source version of a signer. So yeah, one of the things that we saw in the space is that a lot of embedded wallet providers, they were doing like a really good job onboarding people, but they were also locking developers into creating these embedded wallets. And so OpenSigner is just a solution that let any developer self-host these non-custodial wallets if they want, right? And so, yeah, it's just, I think, like one of the first open source solutions around that. It uses very consolidated technology, so it's nothing revolutionary, which I think, like in security, is something very important. Like, we are very attracted for fancy terms and fancy technology, but something that works and is solid and doesn't take like 20 security engineers to on-ramp, it's actually appreciated.
Right. So with that, I actually quite like it. So what would you say like the biggest problems with like wallet UX or like infrastructure that you guys are solving at the moment?
I think one of the biggest problems, so from a product perspective, or like even in software in general, like when the project gets big enough, or let's say when the project gets big enough, people start asking, especially within the team, hey, how do we have fail safes? Or hey, how do we actually want to, what if we want to change providers and stuff like that? And this happens like big companies, they have 2-3 different providers for just one single thing. Like, look at payments in like traditional Web2. You will probably have Stripe, and then you'll have Adyen at the end, right? So if one fails, the other comes in, right? And I feel like in wallets today, we don't have these options, because once you have a wallet created with one provider, you cannot create it with another one, right? Or you can, but like it's a very bad UX. And so one of the biggest unblocks with OpenSigner is kind of like being able to be completely vendor free. So you have zero lock-in on the provider that you're using. You can self-host this yourself, and then you're good to go. And I feel like that's quite a big of a pain, and like the market will start realizing about that very soon. The other interesting thing, and what we actually saw with the demo, is we went from creating a wallet that is non-custodial to attaching it like a smart contract to send a transaction without gas, like without anything. And we did this in like 15 minutes, and probably 5 minutes was me figuring out the environment variable, right? So I think this is pretty cool, and this is actually like a very good UX improvement for developers that don't need to juggle through 3-4 vendors to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the biggest thing is that I've also been thinking about, especially with like 4337 accounts, right? When you start implementing it, you're essentially vendor locked from there, right? It's very difficult to migrate because everyone has their own implementation. So I really like how you guys handle that.
Yeah, that's also true. That's problematic.
Yep, right. So a little bit of like a controversial question, if you will, like a 4337 versus 7702. So how do you see those like stacking up against each other? You guys make use of both, and like how the future of just general wallet UX is going to look like with both of those solutions?
Yeah. I mean, each one of those comes with like different pros and cons. We started with 437, and we also built like a 7702 implementation as like a contract delegator. To be honest, the benefits of 7702 at this point, I think, are better than 437, just because of the interoperability of these accounts. With 437, you need to deploy a smart contract wallet in every single chain. And so if you do it correctly, you have the same address across chains and stuff like that. But then also, if these accounts receive an upgrade, like in what chains you do the upgrade? In what if like one of the chains, this smart contract adds another signer, and now you have another signer in one chain, but in another chain you don't have the signer. Like it's a bit messy, right? So 437 would be extremely useful if you're building a savings app, for instance, and you know that this savings app it's in one chain, and in one chain it gets the yield and it works really smoothly. You don't have problems around one single private key and just not being able to rotate it and stuff like that. 437 solves that really, really well. 7702, it's more practical when it comes to migration process between vendors and when it comes to interoperability across chains, because now you have the EOA, And so with the EOA, it's where the funds are actually like where the balance of the wallet like lives. And so you can take that on any other chain like MetaMask, for instance. And if you delegate to a contract, and then imagine like in 2 years you have like a new contract that is way better, you can just redelegate to this new contract, and you get the benefits of this new one, right? Which is pretty cool. And like with 437, you would just either have to upgrade to whatever implementation that your provider did, or just have to move all the funds to the new smart contract wallet. So yeah.
What do you think about the security of 7702, and how are you guys solving for that, right? Because with that is you're delegating a contract to act on your behalf.
Yep.
How would it's very difficult to decode that data and present it in like a human readable format as to like what the contract can do and what kind of actions they can execute, right? So how are you guys solving for that?
Yeah. So there's one thing on the blind signing and how, like as an ecosystem, you solve for making like more human readable. And I think on that front, there's a couple of like good initiatives to make a standard around that. And then it's another thing, how do you manage this private key not being able to be modified or rotated? Something really cool that we've been experimenting with that, it's basically using on-chain passkeys. So the idea, it's pretty simple, but it's pretty strong as well. We have a good demo of it on like passkey-wallet.com, where you basically are prompted to create a wallet. And then once you create a wallet, what you actually do is like you register this private key with a WebAuthn on-chain, and then you get rid of the private key. Right. So now the cool thing around this is that every time that you want to, make a transaction, you would need to verify, like you will need to sign it with your passkey, and there's no, potential of like losing your private key again, because the private key is now the WebAuthn, which is like pretty solid. The shortcoming of it is, the passkeys are bound to domains, and so if let's say you create this passkey in a domain called xyz.com, and this xyz.com change owners or something like this, then it's a bit problematic as well.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting concept. But yeah, I think I'm out of the questions. I'll give you the room if you want to, anything that you want to mention that we haven't spoken about.
No, I think we briefly touched all the points that I think were worth mentioning. From the Openfort side, we are actually really excited on how this chain abstraction implementations of like making stable coins, making any ERC20 token feel as smooth as it is one in one chain. It's actually really exciting. And so from an implementation standpoint, for us, it's as smooth as basically delegating to a contract that allows for resource logs or something sort of similar, and then from there you can actually start experimenting this fully fledged experience that, for instance, you guys are working on, which is pretty solid.
That's one of the biggest things that we're working on, is towards that global balance. Where you're just abstracting the chains and you just see that singular unified balance.
Solid. That's
awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was a big pleasure. Stay on the tune for the next episodes. Thank you guys for watching.
This was great. Thanks.
Thank you, John, for joining.
Thanks, Lava. Nice.